Naomi Brooks was bending to clean spilled water when the manager decided her mistake deserved an audience, not knowing the quiet man in the last booth could buy the entire restaurant before sunrise. Luciano's was packed that Friday night, the kind of New York crowd that made every table feel like a stage. Candlelight glowed against wine glasses. Forks touched porcelain with soft, expensive sounds. The scent of garlic butter, basil, and roasted tomatoes drifted from the kitchen while waiters moved between tables in black uniforms, balancing plates of pasta under warm amber lights. Naomi had been on her feet for 9 hours, smiling through sore ankles, carrying trays past people who looked through her until they needed something. She was 28, black, tired, and careful in the way women become careful when one complaint can cut a whole weekend of income. Table 12 was the VIP table, for guests in tailored jackets, laughing too loudly over a bottle of red wine that cost more than Naomi's electric bill. She approached with ice water and fresh napkins, keeping her posture straight, her voice warm. "Good evening. Can I refresh anything for you?" One of the men leaned back without looking, dragging his chair into her path just as she stepped around the table. The movement was small, almost casual, but enough. Naomi's hip caught the tray. One glass tipped, struck the edge of another, and fell to the floor with a bright crash. Water spread across the tile, splashing the hem of the white tablecloth. Conversations stopped nearby. Naomi's breath caught. "I am so sorry," she said at once, kneeling to gather the larger pieces with a towel before anyone could step too close. "Please give me one moment." She had barely touched the floor when Peter Langford appeared beside her, his polished shoes stopping inches from the spilled water. Peter always moved quickly when rich customers were watching. He wore a slim gray suit, a silver name badge, and the kind of smile he offered only to people who could afford appetizers without checking the price. That smile was gone now. "Naomi," he said, loud enough for the surrounding tables. "Do you know how many girls would beg to stand where you are?" Her fingers tightened around the towel. "The chair moved into my path, Mr. Langford. I was just trying to clear it before someone slipped." The man at table 12 raised his eyebrows and looked away, suddenly fascinated by his wine. Peter did not even glance at him. "Excuses make this worse." His voice sharpened, clean and public. "This is Luciano's, not some corner diner where sloppy service is tolerated." A woman at the VIP table gave an uncomfortable little laugh. Someone 2 tables over lifted a phone, pretending to check the time. Naomi felt the room closing around her, every candle, every glass, every silent customer turning into a witness she had not asked for. She kept her eyes on the floor because if she looked up too soon, the tears might follow. "I will clean it," she said quietly. "No," Peter replied. "First, you will apologize properly to the guests whose evening you interrupted." Naomi went still. The water had already reached the leg of a chair. Safety came before pride. But pride was what Peter wanted from her now, not restaurant standards. He wanted it lowered in public. At the last booth near the dark window, Adrian Vale sat alone with a black coffee he had not touched. He was a white man in a black suit, calm as winter, his face half lit by the candle on the table. He had come to Luciano's to judge whether the restaurant was worth saving. Instead, he watched a manager choose humiliation over truth, and a waitress kneel in spilled water while the man responsible for it stayed comfortably seated. Adrian did not speak. He only folded his receipt once, slowly, and kept watching. Naomi Brooks had learned to measure danger by tone, not volume. Peter Langford never needed to yell when customers were present. He preferred the cleaner kind of cruelty, the kind wrapped in restaurant language and delivered with a smile sharp enough to cut without leaving evidence. As she knelt beside table 12, pressing a towel into the spreading water, she could feel his disappointment hanging over her like a spotlight. "I said apologize properly," Peter repeated. Naomi rose slowly, keeping the broken glass gathered safely inside the towel. Her palms were damp, but her voice stayed even. "I apologize for the interruption," she said to the table. "I will reset everything right away." It was professional. It was enough. But Peter wanted more than enough. He wanted the room to see who held power. "Look at them when you speak," he said. Around them, forks stopped halfway to mouths. The man who had moved his chair leaned back with a faint smile, enjoying the distance between cause and consequence. Naomi lifted her eyes. "I apologize for the interruption," she said again. Your table will be taken care of. Peter exhaled through his nose, as if her dignity itself offended him. That is not gratitude. Do you know what a Saturday night station here is worth? Do you know how many girls would take this uniform and thank me for the chance? Naomi did know. She knew the exact worth of a Saturday night station because she counted it every week against rent, groceries, and Jordan's college application fees. Jordan was 17, brilliant, and careful in a way no boy should have to be careful. He kept brochures from state universities under his mattress and pretended community college was his first choice because he knew Naomi listened through thin apartment walls. Their mother's medical bills still arrived in envelopes with red print, though she had been gone almost a year. Naomi opened them at the kitchen table after midnight, sorted them into piles, and told Jordan everything was handled. Everything was never handled. It was carried. She carried it in her smile, in her back, in the soles of her black work shoes as she walked home from late trains with pepper spray on her keychain and tomorrow already waiting. Luciano's was not her dream. It was a lifeline. The tips were good when guests were kind, and even when they were not. The money could keep Jordan in his prep program, keep the lights on, keep the future from collapsing into whatever emergency came next. Peter knew that. Managers like him always knew who could not afford to walk away. He stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to sound private while ensuring the nearby tables still heard. You are replaceable, Naomi. Do not confuse my patience with need. Something in her chest tightened, but she did not let it show. Her mother had taught her that honest work was not begging. I understand, Naomi said. I will finish cleaning the spill. Peter smiled then, satisfied by the shape of her restraint. After your shift, we will discuss whether you keep weekends. The words landed harder than the broken glass. Without weekend shifts, Jordan's deposit for the summer program would vanish. Naomi bent again, because the floor still needed cleaning and because sometimes survival looked like swallowing a scream and reaching for another towel. In the kitchen doorway, one busboy looked away. A hostess pressed her lips together. Nobody spoke. Silence was the uniform everyone wore under Peter Langford. At the last booth, Adrian Vale watched the entire room fail her in different ways. He noticed the customer who caused the spill and said nothing. He noticed Peter's performance. He noticed Naomi's hands shake only when she turned away, never when the room was looking. Adrian had spent his life reading people who lied with expensive smiles, and by the time Naomi carried the wet towels toward the service station, he had already made his decision. Luciano's did not need a new menu. It needed a new conscience. Naomi reached the service station with the wet towels pressed against her chest and the broken glass wrapped safely inside, and only then did she let her breath leave her body. The station smelled of lemon sanitizer, hot plates, and espresso grounds. Servers brushed past her with trays balanced high, pretending not to notice the shine in her eyes because pity could be dangerous in a place ruled by Peter Langford. You okay? Whispered Mia, the youngest hostess, barely 20 and already learning how to disappear. Naomi nodded because no answer would have been simple. Her hands moved automatically, dropping the glass into the safety bin, rinsing the towel, reaching for a fresh stack of napkins. Motion was easier than feeling. Through the kitchen window, she could still see Table 12 laughing over new drinks, the man who had moved his chair leaning back like nothing had happened. Peter had comped their appetizers. Of course he had. Rich discomfort was always treated like an emergency. Worker humiliation was just part of the atmosphere. Naomi checked the clock above the bar. 9:48. 3 more hours until closing. 3 more hours of smiling, refilling water, offering dessert, and pretending she did not feel the word replaceable sitting under her ribs like ice. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She glanced down quickly, afraid it might be Jordan, but it was only a reminder from the college prep portal. Final deposit due Monday. $475. Naomi closed the notification before anyone could see it. That number had been haunting her for 2 weeks. Saturday and Sunday shifts would have covered it. Without them, she would have to choose between rent and Jordan's future, and she had promised their mother she would never make that boy shrink his dreams to fit their bank account. A server named Luis passed behind her and muttered, I saw the chair move. Naomi looked up. His face was tight with guilt. Then why did you not say something? She asked, not sharply, just tired. Luis swallowed. Because Peter already cut my hours once. There it was. The whole restaurant's truth, served without garnish. Naomi could not even be angry at him. Fear made cowards of good people every day. She only nodded and picked up the tray for table 6. I know. Out on the floor, the room had recovered its appetite. Wine flowed. Plates landed. Candles flickered over people who would forget her face before paying the check. But Adrian Vale had not forgotten. From the last booth, he watched Naomi return to service with the kind of control that did not come from weakness, but practice. He had seen men in boardrooms lose composure over smaller insults. He had seen heirs crumble when denied praise. Yet this woman, publicly shamed for an accident she had not caused, adjusted her apron, lifted a tray, and kept the restaurant moving. Adrian's coffee remained untouched. Beside it lay the folder he had brought to review Luciano's financials, including Martin Sloane's desperate offer to sell before the bank took the place apart piece by piece. Adrian had planned to negotiate slowly. He no longer felt slow. He signaled for the check. Naomi came to his table with the same professional warmth she gave everyone, though her eyes were a little red at the edges. Can I get you anything else tonight, sir? Adrian looked at her for a moment, measuring what kind of question would not insult her dignity. No, he said. Just the check. She placed it on the table. Of course. As she turned to leave, he spoke again. Miss Brooks. She paused. Very few customers used her name without making it sound like a demand. Yes, sir. Adrian's voice stayed low. Do not let tonight make you quit. Her expression shifted, just slightly, surprise breaking through exhaustion. I was not planning to. Good. He took a silver pin from inside his jacket and wrote on the back of the receipt, his hand steady under the candlelight. Then he placed several bills beneath the saucer, enough to be noticed but not enough to make a scene. Naomi did not see the note yet. Peter did. From across the room, his eyes narrowed at the money, already calculating how to claim control over something that had not been given to him. Adrian stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked toward the exit without looking back. Outside, New York rain streaked the window like dark silk. Inside, Naomi carried plates past table 12 while her future sat folded beneath a coffee cup, waiting for her to find it. Naomi did not reach the receipt until nearly midnight. Luciano's had a way of swallowing hours whole, especially on Fridays, when the dining room refused to empty and the kitchen kept calling for runners as if exhaustion could be scheduled out of existence. Table 12 finally left after Peter bowed through their compliments, accepted their hollow complaint about service disruption, and promised them priority reservations next time. Naomi watched from the service station as the man who had moved his chair signed his credit slip without once looking in her direction. He tipped well, not because he felt sorry, but because people like him often paid generously to avoid thinking deeply. Peter collected the folder himself and smiled at the number. See, he said when he passed Naomi. That is how professionals recover a table. Naomi said nothing. She had learned that silence could be a locked door if you stood behind it correctly. Only after the last dessert plates were cleared did Mia point toward the back booth. Your quiet coffee guy left something. Naomi crossed the dining room with a bus tray against her hip. The candle on Adrian's table had burned low, the wax pooling like melted gold around the glass. His cup sat untouched, the black coffee cold beneath a thin skin. Beneath the saucer were 5 crisp $100 bills. Naomi froze. $500. Her first thought was Jordan's deposit. Her second was rent. Her third was that Peter must not see it. But Peter always saw money. Large tips get reported, he said behind her, appearing with the soft footsteps of someone who enjoyed catching people off guard. Naomi picked up the bills and held them flat in her palm. I know the policy. Policy also says management may redistribute extraordinary gratuities when service recovery is involved. His eyes rested on the cash with practiced hunger. Naomi felt something inside her turn very still. The table was mine. Peter smiled. The recovery was mine. For a moment, the whole night balanced on that sentence. Her labor, his credit. Her humiliation, his lesson. Her money, his policy. Then the receipt slipped from beneath the saucer and landed on the table, backside up. Naomi saw the handwriting before Peter did. Do not quit before sunrise. For words, written in black ink, calm and deliberate. Beneath them was a name, A. Vale. Peter reached for the receipt, but Naomi was faster. She folded it once and placed it in her apron pocket. His smile thinned. Give me that. It has my name on the check, Naomi said. It was left at my table. Peter's eyes sharpened. Do not get brave because some lonely man overpaid for coffee. I am not being brave, Naomi replied, her voice quiet enough that Mia and Luis both stopped pretending not to listen. I am keeping what was given to me. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Peter could have pushed harder, and on another night he might have. But something about the name on the receipt had unsettled him. He looked toward the front window, where rain blurred the streetlights, and Adrian Vale was long gone. Fine, he said at last. Enjoy it. We will discuss your weekends tomorrow. Naomi tucked the bills safely inside her server book, but the money no longer felt like the most important thing in her pocket. The note did. Do not quit before sunrise. She did not understand it, but the words stayed with her through closing, through mopping, through Peter's clipped instructions, through the final count of the register. At 2:18 in the morning, Naomi stepped onto the wet sidewalk outside Luciano's, shoulders aching, shoes damp, receipt folded beneath her fingertips. Across Manhattan, behind tinted glass in a quiet office above a private club, Adrian Vale sat across from Martin Sloan and a tired attorney. The sale papers lay open on a polished desk. Martin rubbed both hands over his face. You want to close tonight? Adrian signed the final page without looking up. Before sunrise, he said. And somewhere in the city, Naomi Brooks walked toward the subway with no idea that the restaurant where she had been humiliated no longer belonged to the man who allowed it. Morning came gray and thin over Manhattan, washing the city in the pale light that belongs to people who have not slept enough. Naomi Brooks reached her apartment just before 3, counted the $500 twice at the kitchen table, then slid $475 into an envelope marked Jordan. The remaining $25 went beside the electric bill, a small mercy in a week built from hard choices. Jordan was asleep on the couch with a textbook open on his chest, one hand still holding a pencil. He looked younger that way, almost like the little boy who used to follow Naomi from room to room after their mother got sick. She covered him with a blanket, set the college deposit envelope inside her purse, and finally allowed herself to sit. The receipt lay on the table under the yellow kitchen light. Do not quit before sunrise. Naomi read it again, trying to hear the voice of the man who had written it. Adrian Vale had not seemed like someone who left careless messages. His stillness had been too exact, his eyes too aware. She searched his name on her phone, but the results were strange, scattered between restaurant investments, private clubs, charity boards, and articles that said little while implying a great deal. White male investor. Hospitality magnate. Quiet power in New York dining. No warm interviews. No family photographs. No soft edges offered to strangers. Naomi should have felt afraid. Instead, she felt watched by something larger than Peter Langford's small kingdom, and for once, that did not feel entirely hopeless. She slept for 2 hours in her work pants, woke to Jordan making instant coffee, and nearly cried when he hugged her without asking why her eyes were swollen. Big test today? She asked, pretending her voice was normal. He nodded. And your shift? Later, she said. I have to stop by the restaurant first. Jordan frowned. On your day off? Naomi touched the envelope in her purse. Something changed. She did not know how true that was until she arrived at Luciano's at 10:15. The dining room was closed, chairs still stacked on a few tables, morning light falling across polished glassware. Staff members stood near the bar in confused clusters, whispering over paper cups of coffee. Peter was there too, wearing yesterday's confidence with a fresh tie, though his eyes looked restless. Everyone quiet, he announced. This is a brief operational meeting. Some ownership paperwork is being finalized, but nothing changes for staff unless I say it does. The front door opened before anyone answered. Adrian Vale stepped inside with Martin Sloan beside him and a woman in a navy suit carrying a folder. Adrian wore black again, simple and immaculate, his white face calm under the muted light. The room seemed to stand straighter without being told. Peter blinked, then forced a smile. Mr. Vale, we were not expecting you this early. Adrian walked to the bar and placed a signed contract on the counter. As of this morning, Luciano's belongs to me. The silence was instant. A coffee cup stopped halfway to Mia's mouth. Luis stared at Naomi, then at the man by the bar. Peter's smile did not fall all at once. It cracked slowly. Of course. Congratulations. I look forward to continuing the standards Mr. Sloan established. Adrian looked at him for the first time. That is exactly why we are meeting. Peter's throat moved. Naomi stood near the service station, feeling the folded receipt in her apron pocket like a small flame. Adrian did not look at her yet. He looked at the restaurant, the tables, the staff, the kitchen door, the polished floor where she had knelt the night before. Before service resumes, he said, "We are going to discuss what happened here last night." Peter laughed once, too quickly. A minor service incident. Adrian opened the folder. No, a moral failure with witnesses. The room went still enough to hear the refrigerator hum behind the bar. Naomi's hands trembled, but this time she did not hide them. Dawn had passed. She had not quit. And now the man who told her to stay was standing in the center of the place that tried to make her small. Adrian Vale let the words settle before he opened the folder. A moral failure with witnesses. No one in Luciano's moved after that. The morning light made the dining room look almost innocent, falling softly across polished silverware and folded napkins. But everyone who had worked the night before knew what those tables had seen. Peter Langford adjusted his cuffs, trying to rebuild himself from posture alone. "Mr. Vale," he said carefully. "With respect, restaurants run on standards. Sometimes staff need correction. Guests expect excellence." Adrian's eyes remained on the pages in front of him. Correction teaches. Humiliation feeds the ego of the person giving it. Peter's smile tightened. The waitress dropped glass at a VIP table. Adrian looked toward the woman in the navy suit. She placed a tablet on the bar and turned it so the staff could see. The security footage began without sound. Table 12. Naomi approaching with water. The guest leaning back. The chair sliding into her path. The tray tipping. The glass falling. Naomi kneeling immediately to clear the spill. Peter arriving without asking one question. The room watched the truth replay itself in blue-gray video, stripped of excuses, stripped of tone, stripped of the performance Peter had staged for the guests. Luis lowered his head. Mia covered her mouth. Naomi stood very still, her heartbeat loud in her ears. She had known what happened. She had lived it. But seeing it from above, seeing how small the accident was and how large Peter had made her shame, sent a quiet ache through her chest. Adrian paused the footage at the moment Peter stood over her while she knelt on the floor. "Tell me," he said, turning to Peter, "what part of this required a public apology?" Peter's face had begun to pale. The guests were upset. The guests caused it. We did not know that at the time. Adrian's voice did not rise. "You did not want to know." That landed harder than shouting. Peter looked around the room, searching for loyalty where he had planted only fear. No one offered it. Adrian resumed the footage. The staff watched Peter speak, watched Naomi rise, watched the nearby tables stare, watched the customer at table 12 smile, while Naomi apologized for something he had caused. Adrian stopped the video again. A restaurant is not judged by how it flatters people with money. It is judged by what it protects when money behaves badly. Peter swallowed. "I was protecting the business." "No," Adrian said. "You were protecting the comfort of a man who lied by silence. And you paid for that comfort with her dignity." Naomi looked down, not because she felt ashamed, but because the words had touched the exact place she had been trying to keep hidden. Adrian turned to the staff, who saw the chair move. For a moment, fear held the room by the throat. Then Luis lifted his hand. "I did." Mia followed. "I saw part of it." The busboy near the kitchen raised his hand too. "I knew she did not just drop it." Adrian nodded once, not accusing them, not forgiving them too quickly either. "And why did no one speak?" Luis answered in a whisper. "Because we need our hours." The truth entered the room more quietly than shame, but it stayed longer. Adrian closed the folder. "That ends today." Peter stepped forward. "You cannot possibly make a staffing decision based on one difficult night." Adrian looked at him fully then, and the air seemed to lose warmth. "This folder contains 6 months of altered schedules, withheld tip adjustments, written complaints buried under your desk, and 3 resignations mentioning your behavior by name." Peter's mouth opened, but no defense arrived. Adrian placed the folder flat on the bar. "You are relieved of your position effective immediately. Payroll will be audited. Every dollar owed to this staff will be returned. You will leave through the front door, quietly, with the same dignity you denied others." Peter looked at Naomi then, and for the first time, he did not look above her or through her. He looked at her as the person who had survived his power long enough to see it end. Naomi did not smile. She did not need to. Adrian faced her, his voice lowering. Miss Brooks, what happened here last night should never have been allowed. Naomi's hands trembled once, then steadied. I only wanted to do my job without being made small. The room went silent. Adrian nodded. Then that becomes the first rule of Luciano's. Peter Langford left Luciano's through the front door at 10:58 in the morning, carrying a cardboard box that held framed certificates, a spare tie, and the last pieces of authority he had mistaken for character. No one clapped. No one laughed. The staff watched in silence, not because they wanted revenge, but because they were learning what it felt like when fear finally lost its office. The bell above the door gave one small chime as Peter stepped onto the sidewalk, and then he was gone, swallowed by a city that no longer cared what title had been printed on his name badge. Inside, the restaurant remained still for another breath. Naomi Brooks stood near the service station with her apron tied tight and her shoulders straight, feeling the strange emptiness that comes after a long pressure lifts. She had expected relief to feel louder. Instead, it felt quiet, almost tender, like the first clean breath after leaving a crowded room. Adrian Vale turned to the staff, but he did not stand behind the bar like Peter used to. He stood in the open space between the tables, where everyone could see him and no one had to look up too far. Luciano's will open tonight, he said, but not under the rules that kept you silent. The woman in the navy suit began handing out folders. Every employee will receive written schedules, corrected tip records, and a private meeting this week to review unpaid wages or unfair penalties. Mia blinked as if paperwork could be a miracle. Luis rubbed both hands over his face, whispering something in Spanish that sounded like gratitude and exhaustion at once. Adrian continued. No manager will ever use hours as punishment. No customer complaint will be accepted without review. And no employee will be asked to apologize for something a camera, witness, or basic honesty can disprove. Naomi felt those words enter the room and rearrange it. They did not erase what had happened. They built a fence around what would never be allowed to happen again. Then Adrian looked at her. Miss Brooks, may I speak with you privately? The old fear rose automatically, but it found no place to land. She nodded and followed him to the small corner table near the window, the same place where rain had streaked the glass the night before. He did not sit until she did. That, more than anything, made her throat tighten. Peter had always made people stand while he judged them. Adrian placed a single folder on the table. This is not a reward for being humiliated, he said. I do not pay people for pain. Naomi looked at the folder, but did not open it. Then what is it? A role that should have existed before I arrived. Floor lead trainee and staff advocate. Higher hourly pay. Health benefits after 30 days. Authority to report abuse directly to my office. Training if you want management. No obligation if you do not. Naomi stared at him. The words sounded too large for the vinyl chair beneath her, too official for the hands that still smelled faintly of sanitizer and coffee. Why me? Adrian's answer came without performance. Because last night, when this room tried to make you small, you protected the work instead of your pride. That is leadership. Her eyes burned, but she did not look away. I'm not sure I know how to lead people. Good, he said. People who are too sure usually only know how to control them. At the counter, Mia laughed softly through tears. Luis began setting clean glasses on the shelf with a steadier rhythm. The kitchen door swung open, and the smell of simmering tomato sauce drifted into the dining room. Luciano's was still cracked in places. Its walls still held old fear. But something new had entered with the morning light. A rule, a witness, a chance. Naomi opened the folder at last, and the first page had her name printed correctly, not scribbled on a shift chart, not shouted across a dining room, but placed there with respect. She touched the paper once, gently. Adrian watched, silent. He understood that dignity, when returned properly, should never be rushed. By late afternoon, Luciano's had become a restaurant learning how to breathe differently. The lunch prep moved quietly at first, as if the staff were afraid the old rules might come back if they trusted the new ones too quickly. Luis polished glasses with his shoulders lower than usual. Mia taped the updated schedule beside the service station and stood there for a long moment, reading her own name in full shifts she had not expected to keep. In the kitchen, the cooks argued about sauce and timing instead of whose hours had been cut, and even that ordinary noise felt like repair. Naomi Brooks spent the afternoon shadowing the woman in the navy suit, whose name was Claire Morrison and whose patience made paperwork feel less like a threat. Claire explained incident logs, tip audits, staff protection policies, and how to document a customer complaint without sacrificing an employee to make someone rich feel comfortable. Naomi listened carefully, asking questions when she did not understand, writing notes in the margin with the same focus she used when helping Jordan study vocabulary at the kitchen table. Every so often, she looked across the room and saw Adrian Vale in the last booth, speaking quietly with Martin Sloan's attorney, reviewing vendor contracts, signing forms, changing the future of the restaurant with a fountain pen and a face that revealed almost nothing. He did not interrupt her. He did not hover. He let respect prove itself through distance. At 5:30, the doors opened for dinner service. The first customers entered cautiously, unaware that the polished room had been morally renovated before the silverware was set. Naomi greeted them with a steadiness that surprised even her. "Good evening. Welcome to Luciano's." The words felt different now, not because the room belonged to her, but because it no longer belonged to fear. Table 12 remained empty for most of the evening, a square of candlelight and memory near the front. Naomi passed it twice without stopping. On the third pass, Adrian appeared beside her, holding a small brass sign no larger than a menu card. "Where should this go?" he asked. Naomi read the engraved words. "No plate is served with dignity unless the hands carrying it are respected first." Her throat tightened. "Near the kitchen door," she said, "where staff can see it before anyone else does." Adrian's eyes shifted to hers, and a faint approval crossed his face. "Good." Together, they walked to the service entrance, where Claire mounted the sign at eye level. The staff gathered without being called. Louise touched the edge of it once. Mia smiled down at her shoes. One of the cooks nodded and went back to the stove as if trying not to cry over a piece of brass. Naomi stood in front of the sign, remembering Peter's voice, the spilled water, the cold tile beneath her knees, and the old feeling of being replaceable. Then she thought of Jordan's envelope tucked safely at home, of the deposit that would be paid Monday, of a future that had not become easy but had become possible. Adrian spoke quietly beside her. "Does it say enough?" Naomi looked at the sign, then at the staff, then at the dining room glowing beyond the doorway. "It says where we start." For the first time since she had put on a Luciano's apron, she walked back onto the floor without shrinking her steps. 3 months later, Luciano's no longer felt like a place where people held their breath. The walls were the same warm cream. The tables still carried candlelight, and the scent of basil, garlic, and slow-cooked tomato sauce still drifted through the dining room every evening. But the silence had changed. It was no longer fear. It was focus. Schedules were posted a week early. Tips were counted in the open. Customer complaints were reviewed with cameras, witnesses, and fairness before anyone was blamed. The brass sign by the kitchen door had become part of the staff's daily rhythm, touched lightly by tired fingers before service like a promise that would not be forgotten. Naomi Brooks was still serving tables, but now she trained new hires before the dinner rush, teaching them where the coffee cups were, which regulars liked extra lemon, and how to stand tall even when a table tried to make them feel small. She had not become someone else. That was the miracle. She had become more fully herself. On a cool Thursday evening, Jordan walked into Luciano's wearing his only navy blazer and the shy smile of a boy trying to look grown. In his hand was an acceptance letter folded along the crease from being opened too many times. Naomi saw him from across the room and stopped so suddenly that Luis nearly bumped into her tray. "Go," he whispered. "I have your tables." Jordan lifted the letter before she reached him. "I got in," he said, and his voice cracked on the last word. Naomi covered her mouth, but the tears came anyway, clean and unashamed. She wrapped her arms around him in the middle of the dining room while customers smiled, not because they knew the whole story, but because joy has a way of explaining itself. Tina sent out pasta on the house. Mia brought sparkling water in champagne glasses. Jordan laughed when Naomi placed the plate before him with formal elegance. "For our honored guest," she said. "Future engineer, maybe astronaut if the moon cooperates." He grinned. "I told you the moon belonged to everybody." From the last booth, Adrian Vale watched quietly over a cup of black coffee, just as he had on the night everything changed. He looked no softer to strangers. Still white-faced, still dressed in black, still carrying the kind of calm that made powerful men choose their words carefully. But Naomi no longer saw only the danger in him. She saw the discipline, the memory, the man who had understood that buying a restaurant meant nothing unless he changed what it protected. When Jordan went to wash his hands, Naomi brought Adrian the check herself. On the receipt, she had written in small, careful letters, "Thank you for seeing us." Adrian read it once. Then he turned the paper over and wrote beneath it with the same silver pen he had used months before. "Respect was never mine to give. It was always yours to keep." Naomi read the words and held the receipt against her palm, feeling the circle close without becoming small. Outside, New York moved fast and loud beyond the windows, full of people stepping over one another to reach places that promised importance. Inside Luciano's, a young man ate pasta with an acceptance letter beside his plate. A staff moved without fear, and a black waitress stood in the center of a room that had once tried to make her kneel in shame. Adrian raised his coffee cup in a quiet salute. Naomi nodded back, not as someone rescued, but as someone recognized. And from that day on, no one at Luciano's was ever allowed to confuse service with servitude again.